Well, a very good afternoon to you. Hello, guys. It's Cassim, and welcome back to another episode of Notes on the topic of. In today's topic and on today's notes, I want to share with you some notes on the topic of the power of personal development. Let me repeat that. I want to share with you some notes on the topic of the power of personal development. So, as usual, guys, I want to start off by thanking you very much for joining me. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me, to some of the ideas that I'm going to share with you, and some of the philosophies and thoughts that I'm going to try to articulate as best as I can to you today, in the hopes that in some way they can add some value to your life. They can set you and align you in the right way so that you can go on to prosper, so that you can go on to become a king, so that you can go on to become a winner, a champion, so that you can go on to actually get some of the things that you want out of your life. That is my aim today. That is my goal. And so I'm really keen to add as much value into your life that I can. So I just want to start off by thanking you so much for watching. If you like the things that I'm going to share with you today and you find them useful and you want to join our community, you know what to do. Jump on my YouTube channel, Cassimotive, on YouTube, and subscribe to it. You know what to do when you get there. That's where I put most of my content. That's where I put most of our stuff. And that's where you will find a lot more stuff that I think will be really useful for you and will help elevate your thinking, elevate the refinement of your philosophy, your strategies and your tactics, so that you can become a higher, fuller expression of who you're capable of becoming. So, as I began earlier on, I said to you that today I want to talk to you on this subject of the power of personal development. I've made several notes on this subject because this is a topic which I'm very passionate about: personal development, improving our own lives, working on ourselves. And I thought that I would share with you some notes because I've come to realize that a lot of people don't really know what personal development is. A lot of people don't really understand that they have the ability to actually be able to mold their lives, that they have the capacity to be able to actually improve themselves so as to overcome some of the challenges that are in front of them, whether that be becoming more skillful, whether they becoming better at communication, whether they be developing better relationships through networks, whether that be becoming a person who refines our philosophy. But each one of us has the ability to actually mold and improve our lives so that we can actually overcome some of the obstacles that are stopping us from achieving our goals. And I wanted to share with you some notes on this topic, as I say, in the hopes that in some way it can elevate your life and can help you. And so I want to begin today off by sharing with you a little bit about my story. And I'm going to, I guess, go to the end of what really began me on this journey of personal development, because you may not be aware, about 6.5 years ago, I essentially had a bailiff come to my parents' house. I was living over at my parents' house at the time, and I had a bailiff come to my mum's door. I was working as an estate agent at the time, and the bailiff came to my mum's house, and my mum was at home at the time, and on that day I was at work, and the bailiff essentially said to my mum, "Look, Cassim is in debt, okay? Cassim owes us a lot of money. Cassim has been ignoring our calls, he's been ignoring our letters, and we have a court order here to gain access to your home, and basically anything which he owns, we have the right to be able to sell it so that we can settle the debt and stop coming round to your home and stop coming round and chasing him and going round in circles with him." My mum tried to call me during the day. I already knew. I don't know if you've ever felt this scenario where somebody has called you and you already know that it's not good, or you already know that it's good news, or you already know what it's about. And so what I did is I ignored it, because I knew anytime my mum called me, it was something urgent, right? It was something major. It was something that usually was not good. So I waited until I got home. When I got home, I saw my mum crying. And this was kind of a life-defining day for me, because I had never really seen my mum crying before. I'd only ever seen my mum crying once before, and that was on the day that my biological father died. Since then, I'd never seen my mum cry. So the next time, obviously, that I saw my mum crying was because of me, right? My mum was crying because I had done something. You know, I remember somebody once said that mothers cry one of two tears. They either cry the tears of joy, so their son or their child has got married, they've graduated from university, they've found their first girlfriend, they've gone traveling around and they've safely landed, right? So these are joyous, momentous days for a mother. But mothers also cry another set of tears, which is the tears of disappointment. And on that day that the bailiff came round to my mother's house and I went home, when I saw my mum crying, I realised in that moment that my mum wasn't crying because of joy. My mum wasn't crying because I'd done something wonderful, that I'd accomplished something great. My mum was actually crying because she was disappointed. And the reason why she was disappointed was because my mum thought to herself, is this the son that I raised? Is this the person who I brought up? Is this the little the little Cassim who I raised and nurtured and worked really hard, whether he was in a chicken factory, whether he was in super drugs, to give him the best possible start to life so that he can become the best human being that he can become? And I realized in that moment that, holy shit, my mum was ashamed. My mum was ashamed of the kind of human being which she'd brought into the world. And ever since that day, I basically said, right, okay, clearly this can never happen again. I can never get to the point where I disappoint my mum to such a degree that my mum feels ashamed of the kind of human being which she raised. And that set me on a trajectory and a course which has been, I guess, one of the most exciting roller coaster rides of my life over the last kind of 6.5 years. Because what happened to happen that night is that I went online on YouTube and I typed into YouTube how to improve your life, how to, or something on the lines of how to become a better human being or how to become more successful. And what I'd done inadvertently, without actually realizing it, is that I had got onto the path of personal development. And I've come to realize that many people in our lives, we have never gone onto this path. We've never gone on a path of self-discovery. We've never gone on a path where we discover more about who we are as human beings, about what we have to give to this planet, about some of the errors in judgment that we have been making. Because let's be frankly honest, and I guess this is going to be one of the first statements that I'm going to share with you, which I wrote down as my notes. Most people, and I'm generalizing here, I would say that most people have never really looked at themselves. And I say this statement to you because I was thinking, and this is why I wrote it down on my journal notes, because I was thinking, do you know what? Most people have never really looked at themselves. Most of us, we believe that we are right. Most of us believe that we are on the right path. Most of us assume things. Most of us, we just kind of are going along life and we are kind of have never really examined our life. We've never really questioned our reality. We've never really questioned our perceptions, our truths. We've never really questioned what we believe to be the world as we see it. And the reality of life is that most of us think that we're innocent. In fact, one of the other notes that I wrote down here is that most of us think that we're not dangerous. Most of us do not actually realize that we have something to give this planet. I wrote down another note here which said that, you know, one of the kind of the life-defining days, particularly for a male, for a guy, is a day that he either decides to accept his fate or to pursue his destiny. And I don't think that as a human being, as a male, you can really go after your destiny without you being conscious of yourself, without you actually realizing, oh, hold on a minute, what am I actually good at? Because a lot of people don't even realize that they are good at things. A lot of people, we talk a lot about, well, Cassim, I don't have this, and this is the way I was brought up, and this is who I am, and this is what I don't have, and these are the odds that are against me. But most of us don't ever focus on what we actually have, right? Most of us don't ever come to the realization that we have something to give to this generation. I talk to people all the time, and I say to people all the time that you want to live such a life that you do not become a generational thief. Because I very strongly believe that every single one of us in life has been put on this planet to essentially level out the playing field. What do I mean by this? So if you remember back in school, and I don't know how old you are, but if you're someone over the age of 20, you will understand what I'm going to explain in a moment. When we were in school, when I was in school, let me use myself as an example, we used to play football. And when we used to play football, or we used to play a game particularly where there were two sides, what would happen is we would usually have two captains. Those two captains would start choosing people out of a line. So one person would say, okay, I will have Phil. Another person will say, I'll have Ben. Another person will say, I'll have Ralph. Another person will say, I'll have Brendan. And eventually what would happen is that both teams would have players on their sides. But what would eventually happen is that a wise individual, somebody who is a leader, would identify that there is a lack of balance in these teams. Because on one of the teams you may have 5 players who are all at like level 10 at football. And then on the other hand, you look on the other side and you have 8 players who are all about a 4. And so that person, that leader, that visionary, right, that individual who is got leadership capabilities will look and say, hold on a minute guys, we need to swap a few of these players around. Why? Because we need to level the playing field. This playing field isn't equal. We know that if you have 5 players who are at 10, even if they're going up against people who are 8 of them, and all of the people who are 8 are all about a 4, that the people who are at 10 will win because they simply are better, right? So we need to level up the playing field. And I believe that every single human being on this planet, we all have been put on this planet to basically level out an area of gifting, an area of life. Every single person on this planet, there is something which is unique. There is something which is special about you. And if you would identify what that thing is, and it will be something that you're drawn towards, it will be something that pulls you in that direction. It will be something which asks you, is kind of an irritation to you. You get angry when people don't sort it. It frustrates you. You're like, why can't people do this properly? Why can't someone come along and solve this issue? Well, the reason why you get angry and you feel so frustrated is because it was meant for you to go out and level that playing field. And that may be something to do with animals, it may be something to do with drawing, it may be something to do with electrics, it may be an area of engineering or flowers. You know, one of the things that I try to encourage people, and I guess this would be really useful, particularly as you start looking at personal development, is that one of the things that I believe is really important as we get older is that as we mature as adults, it is really important for us to expand our definitions of things. And it's important for us to expand the way in which aspects of life are manifested. So, for example, you know, when I was younger, I always used to think that when you are choosing somebody who is going to be your life partner, or you're choosing somebody who you want to be your missus, or you want to be your other half, that when you're choosing them in terms of they have to be the most good looking, they have to be the fittest, you've got to be the person who you're most sexually attracted to. But as I've got older, I've had to really refine and expand that. Because actually, when you begin to look at many years ago what I consider to be a spouse, what I consider to be a life partner, that has my knowledge and experience has changed my perception in that actually you would rather have a girl who maybe isn't a 10, but her character is a 10. Right? So I'm talking about the fact that the girl might not be the fittest girl out there, but her character is at a 10. She's loyal, she's loving, she's there for you, right? You would much rather have that. And so one of the things that I think is really important and is something that I encourage you to do is that many of us stick to things. In fact, actually, I wrote down one of the notes here, which was that many of us are led to believe that we're meant to carry everything with us throughout life. I think many of us have been lured, or we've been taught, or we've picked up along the way this perception that we're supposed to carry everything along with us throughout life. That look, if I was really bad at maths in school, then I have to be really bad at maths my entire life. Which is obviously not true, right? That if I didn't read all through my early teens, then and I wasn't particularly very good at reading in middle school or high school or college, then you know what? I'm not going to read as I get older. A lot of us have been under this perception that if I've grown up and I felt that I'm not enough, that I felt that I'm ugly, that I felt that I'm not worthy, that actually my life has no meaning, then I've got to carry that image on, that I've got to carry on living from that truth my entire life. And the truth of the matter is that is not true, right? Human beings, we have the capacity, if we want to, and I say this because it is a choice. You don't have to. But if you decided that actually, I don't really want to be somebody who is shy, who is an introvert. I don't really want to be somebody who is not educated, who's naive. I want to be somebody who is growing. I want to be somebody who is open-minded. I want to be somebody who's developing, who is in a position of leadership, even though I haven't been in a position of leadership my whole life. Then I want you to understand that that is something possible for you. Because, you know, when we look at human beings and we look at the species as a general, human beings are the only species on the planet that have been given this thing called dignity of choice, right? We literally do not have to live the same way as we've been living if we don't want to, right? And I think a lot of people have never really come to this conclusion. In fact, I remember many years ago when that day happened with the bailiff, part of the realization that I came to was really so important for me is that I heard Jim Rohn basically say these sentences. He said, for things to change for you, you're going to have to change. He said, for things to get better for you, you are going to have to get better. And the reason why these phrases and these statements were so profound for me was because I realized, oh, I can improve. Oh, I can change. Oh, I can get better. Oh, so that means that I don't have to continue being somebody who's really bad with money. Oh, that means that I don't have to continue being somebody who is not a kind person. Oh, that means I can continue being, I don't have to keep being somebody who is naive or who isn't a reader or who isn't knowledgeable. Oh, I can change all of that about myself if I really want to. Interesting. But here's where I had to understand. Because for me, when I thought about changing who I was, I thought that if I change who I am, then I'm not who I am, if that makes sense. But what I began to realize was that change isn't so much about almost like a 360 turn. Change is more of a refinement process. In other words, it's really about tweaking ourselves, right? And one of the areas, for example, that I had to tweak is that I had to tweak some of the philosophies. Another word for philosophy is conclusion. I had to change and refine and really condense down some of the conclusions that I had drawn in my life. And maybe for you, as you're listening to me today, you've never even considered for yourself what conclusions have you've drawn. And those conclusions that you've drawn are literally running your life at the moment. And I guess it's a question that I would ask you. What are the conclusions that you've come up in your life to? What have you decided this is the way life is? This is the truth. You know, one of the big things that I had to work on, and particularly I had to refine about myself, is that I had to distinguish between what is a truth and what is the truth. You see, a truth is how I see the world, but the truth is how the world actually is. And one of the things that I had to realize and actually conceptualize for myself is that me and you can both look at the same thing, but based on the way that we've been raised, based on what we've experienced, based on what we've seen, we've heard, we've observed, who's raised us, that we will actually see something different. And that actually, if I'm looking at something and I say that it is a certain way, that does not mean that I'm right, but it also doesn't mean that I'm wrong. And in fact, if you see the same thing that I'm looking at, but you see, let me give you an example. If both me and you went to a music festival and we're both standing on the main stage, just obviously not on the main stage, but we're both looking at an act, a band on the main stage, on the main arena, and you say this is the best band in the world, and I say not really, I disagree with you, that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. That doesn't mean that you're wrong, because from the way that you see the world, it is true that this is the best band in the world, because based on the accumulation of all the circumstances that have led to you being in a position where you're watching this band right now. But from my perspective, this doesn't also mean that I'm wrong or that I'm right. It just means that we both have a perception of a truth, right? But it isn't the truth. And I really had to really look at that. And so one of the things that I would ask you to really think about is, what actually is your truth, right? Look at, if you've grown up, let's say, in a family where basically there's been loads of conflict, there's been loads of people who have manipulated you, there's been loads of people who you've trusted and they've basically broken your trust. Let's look at what, based on those circumstances, how has that shaped the perception that you have of people, of the world, of circumstances? Because so many of us, I think, have never really looked at that. We've never understood that, oh, hold on a minute, if I'm Cassim and my biological father made my mum pregnant at 15, and he basically disappeared off the face of the planet. The fact that because I grew up in Uganda for the first 9 years of my life, and then I moved to Exeter, where Exeter at that time in 2001, there were no black people, and I'd grown up in a country where it's all black people, and now I'd gone to a place where it's just everyone is white apart from my own parents, okay? How does that shape me? How does it shape me, the fact that I went to school with people who were white, with people who were Chinese, with people who were Bengali, with people who were from Pakistan? How does that shape my thinking, my identity, my perception of the world? Because that changes, right? If I've grown up my entire life being around a variety of different people, my level of openness, my level of acceptance, my view of people is affected in a certain way. And I would ask you, based on the way that you've been brought up and the circumstances of your life, how do you see the world? And that may be something, and I guess going back to my title, which is the power of personal development, that would lead me to ask you, what power do you have based on the way that you were raised and the circumstances of your life that perhaps other people don't have, that other people do not seem to be able to see, that other people don't have as a calling card that you seem to have? Have you thought about that? I also wrote down here one of my notes that human beings can transcend their circumstances by leveraging their gifts and resources. Now, I know that this is going to sound almost ridiculous, and many of you are going to say, Cassim, well, are you some sort of idiot? Are you some kind of stupid person? But I never realized that when I was younger, sort of prior to about maybe 6 years ago, I didn't realize that if I didn't have something and if I wasn't good at something, that I could actually improve it, that I could actually acquire it. For example, I didn't know that if I wasn't a confident person, and I've not been a confident person most of my life, that I could actually become somebody who is confident. I didn't know that if I wasn't born naturally as a leader, that I could become somebody who is the kind of person who is a leader. I didn't know when I was growing up that if I grew up in poverty and I grew up on a council estate and I grew up with very little money, that I could actually later on, I could start working on myself and I could start developing my skills, my value to the marketplace, my value to other people, whether that be through a service or that be through some kind of knowledge or a product, that actually I could increase my value to such a degree that I could increase my income. I didn't know that I could do that. I thought, well, if you are kind of born and raised in Africa and you've been in poverty, that's kind of your fate. That is the way life is for you, right? And you can't really go on to become a wealthy person, and you can't really go on to achieve greatness in your life, because greatness is for special people, is for different people. But when I began to realize, oh, I could do something like that. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to do it overnight. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be challenging. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to have to refine things about myself, that I may need to adopt some new attitudes, some new belief systems, that I may need to acquire some new skills, some new knowledge. But if I go along that path and I start working on myself and I start improving myself, that 1% improvement every day over 360 days is actually a turnaround. I didn't know that I could do that. And I say this to you because I recognize that some of you don't realize that, look, if you've grown up your whole life feeling that you're inadequate, you can genuinely now decide, if you start working on yourself and you make the decision to start improving, you could get better, right? If you grew up in poverty and you didn't have very much money, I'm just saying this to you, that if you wanted to, you could go ahead and start getting on the path of becoming a wealthy person. I'm saying to you that if your entire lineage of family have all had diabetes and have all had high cholesterol and they've all died from sort of leading diseases, I can share with you that that doesn't have to be your destiny, right? You don't have to settle for that. Now, look, that obviously all of us have certain genetics and all of us are born in certain circumstances. I get that. But what I'm trying to say is that you can get better. You can improve. You can actually, you can mold your life. Let me put it how one guy once said it. One guy, and I think it was Benjamin Franklin, who said that life is plastic. Life is not stiff and rigid. Life can actually mold. It can get better. There is a plasticity about life. There is a, what's the word I'm looking for? There is a flexibility about life. You can poke life and life will do something. It will push back. And I think that a lot of you guys aren't really exercising this. You have to understand, no other living organism on this planet can do this. None of them. Every other living organism on this planet has to abide by what is called an instinctive code. If you see geese and you saw geese and you looked at them and you said, guys, I've just looked at the weather forecast and you're flying south, I'm telling you that south is not looking too good. You're going to hit a storm. The geese would look at you and continue going in that direction. Human beings, guess what? If we have been really bad with money for the last 10 years of our life, and now we've come to a point where we're like, clearly this isn't really working, right? This is shit, right? I'm about to become exactly like my parents, have no money, have no pension, be broke, can't send my kids to the schools that I really want to send them to. I can't really go on the holidays that I really want. When I go to the restaurant, when I go to restaurants, I don't choose the restaurant based on what I want. I choose the restaurant based on the amount of money that it's going to cost me. If you genuinely decide that I don't want that, I want to be able to go to a restaurant and choose the restaurant that I want to go to based on what I want to eat, not based on the amount of money it's going to cost me. I'm saying to you that you can learn from your mistakes and you can actually mold. You can go in a different direction. It doesn't mean that your end destination is going to be overnight, but it means that you can actually reposition yourself, that you can actually like turn a corner and go through a metamorphosis, go through a transformation, right? And actually improve your life. One of the other notes that I wrote down here, which I wanted to share with you, is this, that here it is. If you've made a mistake in your life, or if you've done what Brendan Burchard says, which is most people enter the woods without looking at the map. If you've genuinely, when you could leave school, you left school, you went straight out into the marketplace, you went straight out into the world, and you started working and you started doing your best, but you've genuinely now arrived at a point in your life where you're like, well, this really isn't working, right? I mean, I've been at this for like 10 years and I'm basically in the same position as I was 10 years ago, but just with more money and just older. If you're like, okay, this isn't working for me, then guess what? You can catch up if you have to catch up, right? If you feel like you're behind, human beings can catch up. If you start working on yourself, if you just start developing yourself, you can catch up. Human beings can correct mistakes. Now listen, there are some mistakes that we cannot correct, okay? If you've killed someone, you can't correct it, okay? If you've murdered somebody, if you've stolen money from somebody, there are some mistakes which you just cannot correct. But there are some mistakes that we can correct. And I'm saying to you that because you have the dignity of choice, you can choose to go and correct some of the wrongs that you've done, some of the choices that you've made, some of the turns that you've made. I also wrote down here that human beings can reinvent themselves, right? If you've been somebody your whole life who's been passive, who's been an introvert, but it isn't working for you anymore, it isn't getting you the life that you want, you can actually reinvent yourself into a person who's got charisma, into a person who is more confident, into a person who is ambitious, who's driven, right? Into a person who's got boundaries. You can do that if you want to. And the last one that I wrote down here is that human beings, we can seek for redemption. We can redeem our lives, our choices, and our mistakes if we want to. But that has to be a choice. That has to be something that you yourself have to want for yourself. And when you want it for yourself, you can actually push life and you can turn a corner and go in a different direction, and life will improve for you. Life will get better for you. You know, part of, I think, of this personal development journey is really looking at the fact that you have to let go of the image that you have been living up to. You know, one of the things that I try to share with people and I try to articulate to people is that most people have never really been seen their whole lives. Most people, we don't know who they are. And I try to say to people that, please let us see you before you die. Let somebody be a testimonial for the life that you live, for the person that you were, for what you stood for what you believed in. Because for most of us, nobody knows who we are. Most of us, nobody knows what we believe, what we stand for. Let me tell you why. I believe that every single one of us, we live this kind of double life, okay? We live this kind of life where we show one side of ourselves, a colour. Let's just use colours, for example. Many of us, we show people a colour which is like red, right? Red may represent that we're confident, that we're outgoing, that we know what we're doing, and that's the perception and that we project out into the world. But actually, who we really are is a color blue. And actually, deep down, we're insecure. Deep down, we don't really know what we want. Deep down, we feel pain really much. We take jokes which are said to us really seriously, and they do hurt us, and they do corrode our self-esteem. And I say to people all the time that most of us will live our lives projecting this color red, and nobody will ever see the blue side of our color. And one of the things that I think is really important is that part of becoming a human being and becoming more mature and becoming really developing yourself and coming of age is to begin to expose your true color, to begin to show the world who you really, really are. Because I think that one of the things that's really important, and I think a lot of people don't understand this, is a lot of people don't get that they have something to give. A lot of people don't understand that the world is dependent on you becoming who you are capable of becoming. I don't think people really understand this, and it took me a little while to really get this, because, I always believe that the way life was is that if I make a decision, then my decision is not really going to be impactful to anything else, right? But that's not true. If you actually observe the world and you observe history and you observe people and you observe your environment, you will notice very quickly that everything is connected. That a choice that you make or you don't make is connected to something else. It's part of the reason why I said earlier on that I'm scared of almost what I am so fearful, and part of the reason why I do these videos and I try to share these notes with you is because I'm scared of becoming a generational thief. I'm scared that if I don't, for example, do this video, that you might never listen to me and start getting on that path of personal development and working on yourself and improving yourself to eventually get to the point where you show the world your gift, where you show the world who you really are, where you actually get to the point where you start exposing and your gifts, your resources, and everything that you have to offer this world. It's part of the reason why I say that one of the wealthiest places on the planet is not where most people would think. The wealthiest place on the planet is the graveyard. And the reason why the graveyard is the wealthiest place on the planet is because loads of people are going to die with gifts inside of them, resources, businesses, art. And all of that stuff is what's called potential, right? Because potential is everything you haven't done, everything you haven't used, everything you haven't manifested or exercised in your life. And a lot of people are going to take businesses and art and ideas with them to the graveyard, making the graveyard even wealthier than it already is. And part of my mission is to ensure that when you die empty. There is part of my mission before I die is to encourage you and to inspire you to the degree that you get to the point where you say, Cassim, there is no more that I could have done in my life. There's no more. Like, I pushed it, I challenged myself, I worked on myself, I tried to do the best that I can with what I had. There is nothing more that I could have done. In other words, I wish for you to live a life where you do not have regrets in your life. That's really the direction that I would insist and encourage you to go down. And I just don't think a lot of people are going down that route. One of the things that I think is also important, and is one of the notes that I wrote down here, is that most people will not really ever do anything special in their lives because they don't expect a lot from themselves. I think that part of developing and looking at personal development and looking at who we are as human beings is getting to the point in our lives where we realize that the world really doesn't expect very much from you. And I've tried to articulate this as much as I can to many of you. You have to understand the world doesn't expect anything from you. There's only two things that I've come to understand the world expects from you. The first is do not try to kill another human being. Okay? And attached to that is do not try to stop anybody else getting what they want. The second thing that the world expects across the entire globe is pay your taxes. No matter who you are, no matter how much money you earn, no matter how poor you are, we all expect people to pay their taxes. Those are essentially the two expectations that the world has from you. Now listen, your parents may want you to do well, they may want you to be successful, they may want you to be happy, but beyond that, that's kind of it. Everything else beyond those kind of parameters is really dependent on you. So in other words, we 100% know that every single one of us has, because of the research, because of all the data, we know that every single one of us has, every child that is born has a capacity for genius. We know it. We know that every single one of us has the ability and the capacity to do the most incredible things. The point is, do you firstly want to do incredible things with your life? And secondly, is that do you realize that in order to do those incredible things, certain aspects of yourself will need to be refined. Certain aspects of yourself will need to be changed. They may need to be swapped around. They may need to be rejiggled. And I say that to you because a lot of people want to stay where they are and have more. A lot of people want level 10 success, but they want level 1 attitude. A lot of people want 10 level success, but they want to have level 1 philosophies. A lot of people want to have a level 10 relationship, but they want to continue living their level 2 lifestyle. And the reality of life is everything has to work in equilibrium, right? If you want a huger level of success, you have to pay the price. Right? You have to give something up. And part of the reason why I said to you earlier on that a lot of people don't ever fulfill their desires and never realize their potential is because, in part, we've been lured to believing that we have to carry everything with us, is because a lot of you guys are under the impression that you have to be who you've been all your life. That you have to think the same way that you've always thought. That you have to behave in the same way that you've always behaved. If you are 35 years of age and you're still playing on the Xbox as if you are 12 years of age, that needs refinement. This doesn't mean that you have to completely give it up and do a 360 and stop going on the Xbox. This just means you have to leverage your life. You have to refine a few things. You have to tune a few things about the way in which you're operating your life, about the philosophy in which you hold, about the belief system in which you've been operating. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're not enough. It just means there is tweaks about you that need to take place in order for you to become your highest, fullest expression of who you're capable of becoming. It's interesting, one of the notes, and I've been doing a lot of research on this recently, but one of the notes that I wrote down here is that everything horrible that has ever been done has been done by human beings, and you are one of them. But in the same breath, everything which is transformational, everything which is magical, everything which is spectacular, everything which is heroic that has also ever been done has also been done by humans, and you are also one of them. And the reason why I wrote that down is because I think it's really important for you to understand that people who do bad things or who live small lives or who don't live up to their potential are exactly like you. In the same breath, people who go on to live incredible lives, people who go on to do incredible things, people who go on to become visionaries and become managers and become leaders and set up businesses and make contributions and change their lives and change their families' lives are also humans. The point being is that all of us are humans, but some of us choose to go sometimes to the left and sometimes some of us choose to go to the right. Meaning that if The difference between you living a remarkable life isn't that you have to be some unique, special individual like Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Hitler, okay? The difference in living a spectacular life is about choice. Is about you deciding to work on yourself, to refine yourself, to improve yourself, to get better, right? And my question to you is, what's your plan for improving yourself? Because if the answer is, I have no fucking clue, Cass, I don't know, then that means you haven't been growing. And we know that anything which is not growing by default is dying. It is for this reason why I say to people, I have these what I call 6 stages of life. And the first stage of life is what's called survival. The next stage of life is what I call security. And to go from survival to security, you have to build something, you have to grow something, you have to have something. And I say to people that a lot of people remain their lives and spend most of their lives in security, meaning that they get a relationship, they make some money, they get a decent job, whatever aspect of their life it will be. And what they do is that they build walls around that aspect of their life. So they've got a good relationship, they found a missus, but instead of evolving and transforming and letting the relationship manifest to its different variations, what they do is that they try to maintain the relationship as if they've just started dating. But we know that there is no way that a relationship can be the same after 5 years of knowing somebody as it was at the beginning. After 5 years, you know their likes, their dislikes, their fears, their ambitions, their preferences, you know their ideologies, you know what pisses them off, you know what brings them light. So how could you possibly have the same relationship at the beginning of your relationship as you do at 5 years? You can't do. And so when people say to me, oh, our relationship is exactly the same as it was at the beginning of our relationship, alarm bells start ringing off to me, because this tells me this person is trying to maintain their life, is trying to put security around their life instead of pursuing the next stage, which is freedom. Freedom is about exploration. Freedom is about transformation. Freedom is about feeling this kind of flexibility to be able to move from left to right, to go in and go backwards. And a lot of people don't have that freedom in relationships. A lot of people don't have that freedom in their workplaces. A lot of people don't have that freedom in their lifestyles. And I wonder whether you've been operating from security and it's now time for you to start going to the next level, which is, and the next stage of life, which is to move to freedom, which is where you're going to have to develop certain things. For example, I meet a lot of people who actually, they've got pretty good lives. They've got a missus, they've got a dog, they own their own house, they get to go on holiday, they've got a good pension. Their life is pretty good. But the next stage of their life is to get to the point where they can start now contributing to their family, to their wider community, right? To people beyond themselves. But in order to do that, they may have to, number one, give up something which they currently do, or they may need, and it's either or and, they may need to acquire something which is going to require them to grow, right? And they may be in a position right now where they're not a manager, but in order to gain more money to be able to build a school or to be able to invest in somebody, invest in a company, invest in a product, invest in infrastructure somewhere, that they may need to make more money. And that will mean that they will need to go up in levels of leadership. And a lot of people stop and don't pursue that route. And listen, I'm not saying to you that you have to become a leader if you don't want to become a leader. I actually believe that every single one of us was born to be a leader, not over people, but in an area of gifting. Every single one of us was born to be a leader in an area of life where we take that life and we elevate it to a whole different level, right? That may be that you are a person in a department and you elevate that department in whatever it is that you do, and you take it to the next level so that it can add into the multiplication of everything that is the actual business itself, right? And this is why I say to people that, you know, to live an incredible life and to do great things, it isn't about you being the leader. You don't have to be at the front. You don't have to be on the billboards. You don't have to be in the trailer, right? The fact that you were the videographer, the fact that you were the sound man still gives you significance, because it ultimately ended up connecting to the bigger picture. And I just wonder whether you thought about that, and the fact that actually, if you would refine your thinking, refine your philosophy, refine your thought patterns, your belief systems, that you could do the most incredible things. One of the other things that I also wanted to add, which I think is really important, is that every single one of us, I believe, has to come to a point in our lives where we realize that perhaps we have something to do with the way that our life has turned out. And the reason why I say this to you is because, you know, look, I think we can agree, every single one of us, the way our life started, we had no say over it, right? Nobody had any say as to where they were born, who their parents were, what school they went to, what food they were given as children. None of us had any say about any of this stuff. But I think it's pretty fair to say, particularly if you live in the UK, that you can go beyond the circumstances in which you were raised in. And I think a lot of people don't get that. I don't think a lot of people get that you can actually rise beyond your circumstances. You can actually live a different life than the one which you were born into. For example, there are some people, and I know this is like bamboozling for people to believe, there are some people who were raised into privilege, who were raised into money, who were raised around resources, but they feel constrained because actually their peers and their guardians are pushing them and encouraging them to go down a route which is academic, become a lawyer, become a doctor. But actually their true calling, their true leaning is in the arts. It may be a performer, it may be a dancer, it may be a teacher. And many people don't realize, oh, just because I've grown up in that world and that is what's expected of me, that I actually have a choice and can make a choice to go in a completely different direction. Now, don't get me wrong, there will be consequences for me going down that route. Maybe my parents might disown me, maybe I might not be as wealthy, I might not be as successful, whatever success is. But that route is the best for me. And I wonder whether you realize that, and I wonder whether you get that there has to come a point where you realize, look, maybe the fact that I'm really unhappy with this route that I'm taking is because in some way I am continuing to go down this route, go down this path, even though it's not the right path and the best path for me. If I've been in multiple relationships and they've all ended due to cheating, I've got to start looking at myself and ask myself, could I have something to do with the way that this is turning out? Could I have something to do with all of these relationships? Now, don't get me wrong, the people have cheated, the people have betrayed me, and how could I have stopped them? But is there do I keep attracting the same sorts of people? Is there something about me that shouts to the world that I would find it acceptable for somebody to cheat on me? And I think a lot of people have never looked at that. And one of the great things about life is to understand that you can refine that area of your life to the degree where you say boundaries, you raise your standards, you look at your trauma. You know, one of the big areas, in fact, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day where I was saying that if there was one thing, okay, that I could give, if I was a politician, that I would give as an absolute expectation of the entire country, it would be that everybody go to at least 2 therapy sessions in their life before the age of 30. Everyone in the entire country. Because a lady called something Salagari once said that nobody gets off scot-free. No matter whether you grew up in privilege, no matter whether you had the best parents, no matter whether you grew up in a safe environment or a volatile environment, no one got off scot-free. Every single one of us suffered some kind of trauma, right? And so as a result of that, a lot of us have never even realized how that is manifested itself in our lives. A lot of us have never even realized that we have errors, that we may be causing other people hurt because of our choices. I was saying to somebody the other day that a lot of people don't really get that if you continue to stay in a relationship which is bad for you, and you know, because you're not stupid, you know the relationship isn't healthy, but yet you continue it, but yet you keep going back to the person, you have to understand that your life isn't just about you. The decision to leave the person isn't just about you, because your decision to stay with a person is not only affecting you, but it's affecting your mum, it's affecting your dad, it's affecting your brother, your sister, it's affecting your work colleagues. Because people can sense it. When you're upset, when you're feeling resentful, when you're angry, people can feel your energy and it affects them. I mean, can you honestly believe that you are going to be in a relationship which makes you unhappy, and over a period of 6 months, nobody be affected by it, nobody notice it? What do you expect? That people are just going to turn their eyes and say, well, what? It's got nothing to do with me? And a lot of people don't realize that unless you go and refine yourself, unless you go and look at improving yourself, at dealing with that trauma, at healing that trauma that you're experiencing, it's going to literally become like cancer, and it's going to damage every part of your life. It's important for us to understand that hurt or erroneous choices don't just affect us, they affect many other people in our lives. And so that kind of leads me to the work and to finish and to what I wanted to share with you. I don't know whether it's been useful for you or not. I don't know whether it's added any value into your life or not, but I just really encourage you to really get onto this kind of personal development route, to really look at yourself. It's part of the reason why I do the journal entries, because the journal entries are there to inspire you to start your own journals, to really examine yourself, to look at, okay, where am I going wrong? What am I good at? What am I not good at? Where am I making bad decisions? Where am I making good decisions? What's working for me? What isn't working for me? Am I on the right path? Have I actually improved as a person? I get that my job, I'm becoming more successful. I get that I've made more money. Wonderful. But am I a better person even though I've earned more money? I'm earning more money than I did 5 years ago, but am I giving equally as much money away to charities, to investing in companies, to helping in businesses, my friends? Am I doing any of that? And when you begin to look at yourself and realize that you can grow, that you can get better, that you can improve, that's when life really begins to become exciting. That's when you begin to live. That's when the adventure of life really begins. And I would just encourage you to pursue that route. So, as always, if you liked what I shared with you today, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel Cassimotive on YouTube for more of that stuff, because that's where I put most of our stuff, and you can join our community. But otherwise, I want to thank you so much for watching, and I shall speak to you very soon. Bye for now.